December 3, 1944. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The train doors creaked open and icy air sliced inward like a knife. Japanese prisoners stepped down onto frozen earth, squinting into the pale glow of winter sun. Their uniforms hung in rags, their faces were gaunt, eyes hollow, lips split from weeks of hunger and travel. They had been told from their first day in uniform that capture meant torture, starvation, and disgrace. They expected brutality. Instead, they caught the scent of something they could not identify, something rich, warm, and impossibly unfamiliar. Smoke twisted up from kitchen chimneys. The smell of meat and hot oil drifted across the snow. One soldier murmured to another, "This must be a trap." The prisoners stood in formation, shaking not from cold alone but from fear, from uncertainty. They had been taught that Americans were savages, that the enemy would strip them of dignity, starve them, mock them until death seemed like mercy. But as they looked around Camp McCoy, at the orderly barracks, the Red Cross officials holding clipboards, the guards who barked orders but did not strike, a question began to rise in their chests, quiet and unbearable. What if everything they had been told was false? And in that instant, standing on foreign ground with the scent of food in the air and no fists falling, they started to understand something even more unsettling than cruelty. Their enemy lived in an entirely different world. The war in the Pacific had been savage beyond comprehension. By late 1944, Japan's supply lines were collapsing. Soldiers on remote islands survived on handfuls of rice, sometimes tree bark, sometimes nothing at all. Malnutrition was not an exception, it was the norm. Men fought with stomachs swollen from starvation, teeth loosening in their gums, skin pulled tight over bone. In contrast, the United States was producing food, fuel, and equipment on a scale Japan could barely imagine. In 1944 alone, America manufactured over 96,000 aircraft. Japan produced fewer than 30,000. American factories launched Liberty ships faster than Germany could destroy them. The arsenal of democracy was not mere propaganda. It was steel, oil, and grain measured in millions of tons. But none of that mattered to the men stepping off the train at Camp McCoy. They knew only what they had endured: hunger, bombing, retreat, and at last the shame of surrender. Sergeant Hideo Tanaka, thin, silent, 23 years old, had been captured on Saipan after hiding in a cave for 2 weeks. He had survived on nothing but roots and rainwater. When American soldiers found him, he expected execution. Instead, they dressed his wounds and placed him aboard a ship. The voyage across the Pacific had been long, cramped, and frightening. Tanaka kept waiting for the punishment to begin. It never came. Now standing in Wisconsin snow, he watched as American medics moved along the line, checking pulses, taking temperatures, examining infected wounds. One medic knelt beside an older prisoner whose arm was wrapped in filthy cloth. The medic removed it gently, cleaned the injury, sprinkled sulfur powder, and bound it again with clean gauze. The prisoner sat motionless. He did not understand English, but he recognized compassion. Tanaka's throat tightened. He thought of his younger brother still somewhere in the Philippines. He remembered his mother in Hiroshima surviving on rationed grain, and he remembered the propaganda films he had watched before deployment, films that portrayed Americans as monsters, lawless and cruel. But here in this frozen camp encircled by barbed wire, the enemy followed rules. Intake process was systematic yet startling in its humanity. Prisoners were deloused. Their lice-infested uniforms were burned. They received medical examinations, genuine examinations, not hurried glances. A dentist even inspected their teeth. One prisoner gave a bitter laugh at that. "They care more about our teeth than our honor," he muttered. A Red Cross official spoke to them through an interpreter. His voice was steady and official. He explained the Geneva Convention. He told them they would be fed, sheltered, allowed to send letters home. They would work, but only under fair conditions. They would not be mistreated. Tanaka listened, but he did not trust it. Words were simple. Actions would reveal the truth. That first night, lying on a cot beneath a wool blanket, Tanaka stared at the wooden beams overhead. Around him, other prisoners murmured in the darkness. Some were angry, some felt ashamed, a few cried softly. Faces turned toward the wall. "They want us weak," someone whispered. "They will feed us well, then destroy us." Or another voice answered, "This is simply how they live." That idea was the most difficult to accept. Not cruelty, not punishment, but normal life. The thought that America's abundance was not a trick but truth. Sleep came slowly that night, and when morning arrived, it brought something none of them expected. Breakfast. The mess hall was long, low-ceilinged and warm. Steam rose from metal trays behind the counter. The aroma reached the prisoners before they stepped inside. Rich, heavy, overpowering. Tanaka's stomach tightened. He had not smelled meat like that in more than a year. The line moved at a crawl. Men gripped their tin trays like shields, eyes flicking toward the guards, waiting for the instant the food would be seized or dumped onto the floor. But that instant never arrived. An American cook, sleeves pushed to his elbows, placed a hot patty onto a soft bun. He added fried potatoes. Then he grabbed a glass bottle, removed the cap and set it onto the tray. The label read Coca-Cola in red script. Tanaka had never seen it before. "Move along," the cook said evenly. Tanaka stepped forward, staring at the tray as if it might disappear. Behind him, whispers moved through the line. "Meat. They are giving us meat." At the tables, prisoners sat in silence. They studied the food with suspicion, with hunger, with something close to fear. One man raised the bottle and smelled it. Then he took a sip. His eyes widened. The sweetness burst across his tongue, followed by the sharp sting of carbonation. He coughed, gasped, then laughed. A short, involuntary sound that startled those around him. Another prisoner, ribs showing beneath his shirt, lifted the hamburger with both hands. Grease dripped down his wrists. He bit into it carefully, chewing as though the motion might shatter the illusion. Then his face collapsed. He bowed his head, shoulders trembling. "Are you all right?" his neighbor asked. The man swallowed with effort. "I had forgotten the taste of fat." Across the hall, two prisoners argued in hushed tones. "They feed us well so we forget our cause, or they simply eat like this every day." That second possibility was unbearable. The idea that this was not a feast, not propaganda, not a trick, but an ordinary Tuesday dinner. Tanaka took a bite of his hamburger. The flavor flooded him, salt, grease, smoke from the grill. He closed his eyes briefly. He was back in Tokyo before the war, eating yakitori from a street stall, but that memory faded. This was different, heavier, more satisfying than anything he had eaten in 2 years. He drank the Coca-Cola. The sweetness made his teeth throb. He thought of his mother boiling weeds to survive. He thought of his brother, if he was even still alive. And he thought of the shame, the deep-crawling shame of eating better as a prisoner than he ever had as a soldier. Around him, other men cried softly. Some covered their faces. Others stared blankly at the walls, struggling to understand what had just occurred. The American guards noticed nothing unusual. To them, this was ordinary. They ate the same hamburgers, drank the same Coca-Cola, and gave it no thought. For them, feeding prisoners was routine, but for the prisoners, it was an earthquake. When the meal ended, trays were gathered. Men returned to their barracks in silence. That night, lying in the dark, Tanaka heard a voice from across the room. "What do you think your family eats tonight?" No one replied, only the sound of breathing and the wind scraping against the barracks walls. Days turned into weeks. The routine settled in like snow. Wake up, roll call, work detail, lunch, more work, dinner, letters, sleep. Tanaka was assigned to a crew that cleared snow from roads beyond the camp. The labor was cold, steady, but not cruel. At the end of each week, he received payment in camp coupons. With them, he could purchase soap, writing paper, even chocolate. The first time he held a chocolate bar, his hands trembled. In Japan, chocolate was medicine. Here, it was sold like bread. He snapped off a piece and let it melt on his tongue. The sweetness was almost unbearable. He wrapped the rest carefully and saved it, though he did not know why. English classes were offered in the evenings. A few prisoners went. Tanaka was one of them. He repeated words slowly after the American teacher. Bread, table, window, family. The word family caught in his throat. He had not received a letter from home. He did not know if his mother still lived. He did not know if Hiroshima still stood. One evening, the teacher wrote a sentence on the board, "I miss my family." Tanaka copied it neatly into his notebook. The teacher asked him to read it aloud. He did, his accent heavy, his voice soft. The teacher nodded. "Good, we all miss someone." Tanaka lowered his gaze. For the first time since his capture, he felt something other than shame. He felt acknowledged. But not every moment was gentle. On a work detail outside the camp, an American farmer watched the prisoners with hard eyes. His son had been killed in the Pacific. When one prisoner stooped to retrieve a fallen tool, the farmer spat onto the dirt near his boots. "Should have let them starve," the man muttered. The guard led the crew back to camp without speaking. That night, the prisoners discussed it in low voices. "Not all Americans follow their own rules," one said. "Of course not," another answered. "They are men like us. Some will hate, some will not." Inside the barracks, life developed strange patterns. Men carved small wooden toys in their spare hours. They invented simple games. They shared stories of home carefully and softly, as if speaking too loudly might cause the memories to vanish. A young guard named Miller sometimes lingered by the fence after his shift ended. He carried photographs of his family. He showed them to prisoners who gathered on the opposite side of the wire. His mother, his father, two young sisters smiling in Sunday dresses. The prisoners nodded. They did not understand his language, but they understood the faces. Tanaka traced a picture in the dirt, a small house, a tree, a woman standing in a doorway. Miller crouched and nodded. "Mother?" he asked. Tanaka touched his chest. "Haha," he whispered softly, the Japanese word for mother. Miller smiled. Another guard called him away, but the exchange had taken place. They had spoken across the divide, if only for a moment. Still, unease simmered beneath the surface. Some prisoners warned against becoming too comfortable. Every kind word is a trap, they insisted. Every smile weakens your spirit. Arguments ignited at night. One man accused another of betraying the emperor by attending English lessons. The accused answered sharply, "What does honor mean if we do not survive to return home?" No one responded. Tanaka remained awake most nights staring at the beams. He thought of the hamburger, the Coca-Cola, the chocolate bar hidden beneath his pillow. He thought of Miller's photographs, and he wrestled with the contradiction that gnawed at him each day. His enemy had fed him, treated his wounds, shown him more care than his own officers ever had. What did that mean? He did not know, but the question followed him everywhere, heavy and inescapable. By the spring of 1945, rumors drifted into the camp. Tokyo was burning. American bombers were striking city after city. The Philippines had fallen. Okinawa was under siege. The prisoners gathered in tight circles, whispering the news like prayers. Some held onto hope. Japan will never surrender, they insisted. We will fight to the final man. Others had stopped believing. Tanaka was among them. He had seen American factories from the train. He had eaten their food, worn their clothing, watched their supply trucks move through camp every day without interruption. He had calculated in his mind, not with numbers, but with his senses. This nation did not starve. It did not ration. It did not scrape by. It overflowed. One afternoon during a work detail, Tanaka stood beside an American truck loaded with crates of Coca-Cola, thousands of bottles packed in ice, bound for bases across the Midwest. He stared at them, thinking, if America could afford to give soda to prisoners, what did that reveal about the war? A guard noticed him watching. Unbelievable, right? The guard said. We have enough Coca-Cola to drown the entire Pacific. Tanaka did not grasp the words, but he understood the feeling. Casual, assured, overflowing. That night he wrote in his notebook, I believed Japan was the center of the world. Now I see we are only one small island. He hid the notebook beneath his mattress. If it were discovered, he would be branded a traitor. Then in August, the news arrived. Hiroshima, Nagasaki surrender. The camp fell into silence. Men sat on their bunks staring into nothing. Some cried, others clenched their fists, trembling with anger or sorrow, or both. Tanaka felt only numbness. His mother had lived in Hiroshima. He would never know if she had survived. The guards did not cheer. They simply maintained the routine. Meals, roll calls, work details. The steadiness felt unbearable. Weeks later, arrangements for repatriation began. Red Cross officials handed out clean uniforms. Medical examinations were performed. Lists were compiled. The day of departure arrived without ceremony. Prisoners walked out of the barracks carrying small bundles. Some held wooden carvings. Others carried letters they had never mailed. As Tanaka passed through the gates of Camp McCoy for the final time, he looked back. The barracks, the mess hall, the guard tower where Miller once stood. He felt no affection, but he felt something. Confusion, gratitude, shame. He had expected cruelty. He had received hamburgers. The journey home was long. The ship was crowded, the Pacific gray and endless. Men huddled together, silent, wondering what awaited them. When Tanaka finally stepped onto Japanese soil, the world he remembered was gone. Cities were reduced to ash, families were scattered. Hunger was worse than ever. His mother had not survived. He learned that from a neighbor 3 days after his return. For weeks, Tanaka did not speak. He labored among the ruins, clearing debris, rebuilding walls. At night, he lay on a thin mat and stared at the ceiling just as he had in Wisconsin. One evening, a child approached him. The boy was thin, his eyes too large for his face. He extended his hand. Do you have food? Tanaka reached into his pocket. He still possessed one piece of chocolate saved from the camp canteen. He had carried it across the ocean. He did not know why. He unwrapped it slowly and placed it into the boy's palm. The child's eyes widened. He bit into it, tasting the sweetness, and smiled. Tanaka watched him, and for the first time since coming home, he felt something other than emptiness. Years later, when his own son asked about the war, Tanaka answered carefully. He did not describe the battles. He did not speak of shame. He spoke only of the food. I learned in America, he said quietly, that kindness is heavier to carry than cruelty. Cruelty you can resist. Kindness you remember. His son did not understand, but Tanaka did not explain further. Some truths cannot be taught, they must be tasted. The legacy of Camp McCoy and camps like it is not found in strategy or victory. It lives in those quiet, unsettling moments when food, warmth, and order collided with fear and loyalty. The prisoners who returned to Japan carried those memories like scars. Some spoke of them carefully, their voices shaking between guilt and gratitude. Others buried them deep beneath silence and pride, but none forgot. Because in the end, war strips men of everything, rank, reason, even hope, but it cannot erase the strength of small acts of humanity. A hamburger shared across enemy lines, a bottle of Coca-Cola placed into a trembling hand, a guard holding faded photographs of his family, a child accepting candy through a fence. Moments so small they might have vanished with time, and yet they remain. Because these gestures, born in the shadows of conflict, remind us that mercy can survive even where hatred seeks to rule. These are the moments that outlast the thunder of cannons and the silence that follows. These are the moments that remind us that even in our darkest hours we are still human, and that is the story worth remembering. If this story touched you, subscribe for more stories about World War II. History like this deserves to be told, shared, and never forgotten. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. These voices from the past still speak, and they always will.